Good day to all, especially to our fundamentals in food service operation instructor, Mrs. Pichi Ignacio. I am Pamela Quezon from BSHM 1B9. So, I will tackle the history food service industry in 20th century. It includes here also the restaurants in 20th century and the types of food service industry. By the end of the 19th century, fine dining restaurants had become part of the landscape for the wealthy aristocratic Europeans and upper-class Americans. These groups transformed eating out into an art form through the 20th century. Restaurants continued to evolve through two world wars and the Great Depression. The 1950s saw the rapid growth of fast food, while the 1960s marked the beginning of casual family dining and chain restaurants. By 2000, more and more families were dining out on a weekly basis. On the 20th century, saw major modernist revolutions in every aspect of cultural institutions like music, art, painting, except food. Why? Well, the answer can be as simple as it can be complicated. It's because the masses needed to eat to the society model change. People now had more money but less time. They didn't have a garden or a farm to grow food, and women are now part of the working population. So I know type of food company rose to meet the need, feed the masses. So let's mention the types of food service industry first. Bistro, brasserie, new wave brasserie, coffee shop, first class restaurant, ethnic restaurant, themed restaurant, international destination restaurant, health food and vegetarian restaurants, cafeteria, popular catering and fast food outlets, public houses, and lastly the wine bars. So let's start the history. Is tableside service the kind of glamour that doesn't stand up to scrutiny? It may be a noble tradition in French restaurants, but in the United States, it's another story. Depending on how you look at it, it can be fun or it can be understood as a way to charge more for lower quality food. I haven't been able to determine how common tableside service was in 19th century America, but clearly chafing dishes were employed long ago, especially where oysters were served. A widely circulated story from 1843 described a man staying at a fine hotel in New Orleans who was outraged that he should cook his own victuals. When he ordered a Venetian steak, and the waiter brought a chafing dish for him to prepare it in. How time changed. By the mid-20th century, restaurants' guests were delighted to prepare food themselves with a hibachi of pan de pâte. Here. One of the most flamboyant sorts of tableside service is the presentation of food on flaming swords. It represented the consummate display of tableside theatrics, particularly at Chicago's Pump Room of the late 1930s and 1940s also. Master of Ceremonies Ernie B. Feld asserted that he preferred to host laughing eaters rather than grim gourmets. He was quite frank about the degree of pretense involved with tableside service at the Pump Room, implicitly acknowledging that formal French service was out of step with mainstream American culture. Women can be chef, unless maybe they wear swimsuits to work.
Wow.
Until the later 20th century, when women began to break the stronghold of the male chef, it was said women simply could not handle the job of a running restaurant kitchen. What follows are the reasons given by the people associated with restaurants of the 20th century. Most of the opinions recorded here were expressed by men, but a few were by women. The effects of World War I were felt before the US declared war against Germany in spring of 1917. Americans living abroad, such as artists in Paris, returned to the US. Some of them returned to Greenwich Village to develop and nurture something quite foreign here, namely cafe culture. In Washington, D.C., wartime bureaucracy required more office workers, increasing the ranks of working women. A new and lasting restaurant clientele as the female workforce grew nationwide. Women's restaurant patronage from 1917 to 1927 went from 20% of all customers to 60% and became foundational to the future growth of modern restaurants. Around the country, low-priced restaurants accustomed to male patronage were forced to add women's restrooms. Many foreign nationals who had worked as cooks, kitchen help, and wait staff in restaurants left to join armies of their native lands. The restaurant labor shortage worsened when the draft began in 1917 and foreign immigration ceased. Immigrants were replaced by Afro-American and white women who migrated to cities. Serving in restaurants became female-dominated. The war brought women to the forefront of food service. Home economists relied to the cost by opening restaurants. In Washington, D.C., a graduate of Cornell's home economics program began a cafeteria for war workers nicknamed the Dumb Econ Lunchroom. Wartime prohibition followed by national prohibition in 1919 dealt a blow to fine dining. The culinary arts of European trained chefs fell into a disuse as many elite restaurants closed after a few lean years. Immigrant tastes were worked by WWI. Those who served in the U.S. military became accustomed to the American diet of beef and potatoes, white bread, and milk, as did Southerns used to hogs and hominy. Meanwhile, on the home front, certain foreign foods such as pasta and tomato sauce were admitted into the mainstream middle-class diet, in this case because Italy was an ally. Wartime also stimulated a more business-like attitude on the part of restaurants, which now had to work smarter to produce profits. They adopted principles of scientific management. For example, they began keeping books and they standardized recipes to turn out consistent food despite changes in personnel. The decade after the World War, I saw the rise of sandwiches, salads, milk, and soft drinks, replacing the heavy restaurant meals served before the war. So, I will highlight the important topic of the history of food service industry in during 20th century. By the time of the century, more people were working and therefore eating out more, especially for lunch. During World War II in the 1940s, the lodging industry prospered as people traveled for war-related reasons. After World War II in the 1940s and 1950s, the quick service restaurant segment of the industry grew quickly. In the 1960s, commercial air travel became popular and builders focused on line near airports as the new place to sit with hotels, motels, and food service facilities. So that's all, ma'am. Again, I am Pamela Quizon from BSHM 1B Night. Thank you and God bless.